So what I'd like to do is talk about the business of law, right? I mean, people forget that professionals are actually they're business people, right? I mean, we kind of forget that sometimes,
Well,
right?
to the extent we're able, we're business people. That's,
Right.
that's the challenge sometimes. So
And so I want to kind of dig into that. But before we do that, now you don't have to go back to 1962, but kind of walk us through how you got into this profession. Is it something you always wanted to do? Kind of walk us through.
Well, quite frankly, no. When I was a kid, my big brother used to insult me by telling me I was going to grow up and be an attorney, and I guess he was right. I majored in history up at the University of North Carolina at Tweetsy, Appalachian State University, and then I went off to UNC Law School, and then here I am.
So this is the only direction in your adult career that you've worked in that you've moved in this direction from almost day one.
Yes, sir. That's correct. When I started, I was not interested in criminal defense. Even when I started practicing law, I practiced up in Maryland for about 3 years doing business litigation and bankruptcy, and I really didn't enjoy it. My wife's from Statesville, and we realized we were about 150 miles from nearest Bojangles, and we eventually ended up coming back to this area. So.
Got it. That makes sense to me because Bojangles delicious.
It is delicious.
It's good.
I don't mind telling you. So let's talk a little bit about the business of this, especially when you started and you moved to the area, right? I mean, you just put up a shingle and put a bell on the door and wait for somebody to come in. How's that work?
Well, I worked over at a law office here in town for about a year. I guess kind of my competitive advantage is I speak Spanish passably well. And so I decided I'd just open up my own place and hire somebody who's bilingual. And that's what I've always done, is always have an assistant who ideally speaks Spanish as a native language, and then speaks English also, of course, very well. So that's kind of the market that I originally catered to. And, of course, obviously I'm happy to represent anybody. My English is pretty good.
Right.
So.
Right. Where do you, in business, we look for these referral places, right? These lead generation places.
Right.
Where does a criminal attorney look for those at? How does that happen?
Well, a lot of it now, of course, is the internet. You got to have a website. Mine's cleaveslawfirm.com. And of course, if you get a ticket, you may get a letter from an attorney. You may get 15 letters from attorneys. You may not get one from me, but of course, I do tickets also. And then, of course, quite frankly, I think the best advertisement out there is a happy client. If you help somebody out in the past and they're happy with you, they're probably going to come back.
Well, that's why you're here. Wes was quite pleased with the work you did for his troubled child.
Not as much as my kids, but yeah, I'm pretty happy.
Well, that's the teenage years,
We were talking about my son and I were. He and his wife, they're going to have their first child here.
Hey,
in
congratulations.
just a couple months. Yeah. And Forrest and I were talking a little bit I said, hey, guess who's going to be on the radio this Friday? He said, I don't know who. I said, Mike Cleaves. He said, oh, man, tell him I said hey. And he said, I couldn't believe it. He'd done some teenage foolishness.
Sure.
And there were a handful of youngsters involved in it, and he was one of them. And
Mike, that's going to be a lot of fun when he calls you on his son someday.
That's right.
Yeah, it'll happen, I'm sure.
That's how it works.
I'm sure. And he said, I couldn't believe it. I didn't know a thing that was going on. He said, the other guys were there all day, and the next day, I stood up, said something. Mike went up to the judge. He came back and said, you can go. we were done inside about 5-10 minutes.
Mike is a genius, I tell you.
That's why,
genius.
That's why it's like the great philosopher Barney Fife said, call the man.
Call the man.
Just call the man.
Well, it was of course teenage hijinks. I don't recall correctly. I don't think it was armed robbery or anything like that.
No.
So, Mike, talk a little bit about I'm trying to, and it's hard to do, right? Because it's so elusive for us business people to talk about the expenses and the income that's generated from a private practice like yours. I have this conversation with doctors, dentists, eye doctors, A lot of professionals have this challenge of jump starting their business. What advice would you give somebody thinking about doing that? Because there's probably not a more difficult time to be an attorney and generate this business revenue than right now. It's a tough time.
Well, there's a lot of competition in the legal profession right now. There's a lot of new attorneys. A lot of people, I think, went into law school kind of to duck the recession and popped out the other side. And of course, competition makes you stronger. But it's a challenge. You've got to have you got to have some kind of business model. You've got to get probably some kind of loan to open up your office and get it established. There's, of course, usual overhead you have with any business, such as paying for a facility, whether you rent or your own or whatever. And of course, there's some things unique to the legal profession, like you got to pay for malpractice insurance and and bar fees and so on and so forth. So it's it's a tough. I remember that first year I opened up. It's a challenge. It can be
you wake
scary.
up every morning thinking, is this going to be the last day I'm an attorney?
Right, and that's just. But it's kind of the I guess the American dream,
Now, when you open your office, I know in my business, my clients tend to move me in the direction of what I'm working on that month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did that happen with you and you turned into this criminal defense attorney, or did you choose to move in this direction and started seeking clients in that area? How did that work for you?
Well, I actually did move towards criminal defense. I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did. When I moved to Statesville and got a job at the office here, they sent me to court, and I really didn't think I'd enjoy it, but I really do. It's very interesting. You talk to people. It's not a paper practice where you just you sit in your office and type things. You meet with people and you talk about their concerns and you go to court and you just try and help them out as best you can.
That's interesting. You said something I didn't think of till you made that statement, which is as a criminal defense attorney, it is more about people and the process than it is the paper. For instance, as I deal with business attorneys, it's all about the documentation, right? So
that's correct.
Describe the difference of that, because that's something I had not thought of.
Well, one of the things that I think is really important is to talk to your client and figure out what is important to your client. And it sounds kind of obvious, but a lot of people have different objectives. Even in a simple misdemeanor representation, they have different concerns. Some people are their big concern and a big source of stress is simply coming to court. Other people's other people are much more concerned with, they're absolutely, they want a trial, they didn't do it, and that's of course fine. And the people, the client always makes those kind of decisions, and my job's just to give them the best opinion I can based on the individual case and what they want.
And walk me through, when do you normally see a client? Is it they're behind bars and need somebody to get them out, or they see that trouble's coming? When does that contact with you happen?
Normally it's after they get charged with something, be it a ticket or arrested for a misdemeanor or arrested for a felony. Sometimes they're in jail and, you got to go see them. Of course, you got to be really concerned about your clients in jail. There's no good day in jail. So you want to go see them quick and see if there's some way to get them out, and the sooner the better. And then you give them all the basic legal advice that you would kind of expect an attorney to give somebody who's facing criminal charges, and then you just you prepare to go to court, and you go to court.
So go ahead and give everybody who's listening how they can reach you. If they unfortunately have this challenge tomorrow, right?
Right. And I always say, I hope you never need my services.
Right.
I do mostly this. I also do some personal injury and workers' compensation and wrongful death and so forth, and a little bit of family law and a few other odds and ends. But my office phone number is probably the best way. It's 704-871-0425. We've got a website, too, which is cleaveslawfirm.com.
Now, you got to say that twice because this is radio. They got to
This
hear
is
it
radio.
second time.
It's 704-871-0425, and the website is cleveslawfirm.com.
And one more time, describe for me the type of law that you do, because it is a wide range of stuff. I was interested in the criminal side, but there is a wide range of stuff.
Well, that's true, and of course I think kind of our main focus is on criminal defense. Again, felonies all the way down to speeding tickets. But we also deal with anybody who's been injured, either on the job or because of somebody else's negligence, that kind of thing, and of course wrongful death. And we do a few odds and ends like help correct birth certificates and name changes. And to answer your question earlier, we kind of try to go with whatever the clients need. And if people have a question about an area of law where we generally don't practice, we try to give some thought to who might be the best attorney to help them out and send them in that direction.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show, Mike, and so now I know when I pop Wes on the back of the head who to call so I don't get arrested.
If I'm the one being struck, I would be the one dialing the phone. and I don't have to remember the number. I just call Mike.
Mike, thank you so much. Before we go off the air, we want Junebug to say hello to all her friends. You want to say hi, Junebug? Just say hello.
There you go. All right, radio debut. Thanks, fellas. I appreciate it.
Right. Thank you so much.